Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of the Committee of Supply will now resume consideration of the estimates of Executive Council. Questions will proceed in a global manner. The floor is now open for questions. The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. Yeah, thank you, Honourable Chairperson. Looking forward to getting some questions here on the economy to the Premier. So I'll start off with this question here. So the Premier can answer for Manitoba here. The total value of Manitoba building permits for March 2025 is down 11.6% from February and down 34.5% from March of last year. Manitoba's residential building permits are also down 16.5% from February. Meanwhile, the value of non-residential building permits for March 2025 is also down 2.1% to $117.1 million and down 60% compared to last March. So just based on those numbers alone, we can see that under this NDP government and this Premier that the economy is not doing so well. Building permits are down, non-residential building permits are down 61% from March of last year, 35% for the total value. That combined with unemployment around 6%, the highest it's been in the past 5 years, and exports down and significantly down to China, 31.5%, and the US down 3.4%. All the stats suggest a struggling economy under the NDP. Some may call we're headed into a recession under this Premier's leadership. In fact, TD Bank chief economist is saying that Canada will shed another 100,000 jobs this year and will have negative growth in the next 2 quarters, including last year's budget introduced a rental housing construction tax credit, but it doesn't seem to be having any impact on large dip in residential building permits. And the construction industry has yet to wait until they file their income taxes to get their tax credit. All signs that this Premier has officially killed the economic horse. While he laughs here for Manitobans, you can probably hear him laughing with his arrogance and his demeanor, where Manitobans are actually serious about the economy. Premier thinks it's a joke. We don't. It's unfortunate that the Premier wants to use such language, but it's okay. Manitobans will see this man or this actor for who he really is. And his smile will only go so far. So I asked the Premier, what else is he doing to recession-proof our economy? And what is he doing to combat these Chinese and American tariffs? What's his plan going forward? I've asked the Premier numerous times in the House, refuses to answer any questions in the House, and here, Manitobans, he won't answer any questions either. Serious questions on our economy, on our growth, on Chinese tariffs, on American tariffs, no answers. So I asked him to provide some detail on how many new residential rental units are being created, how many builders are receiving his tax credit for these rental properties, and what is he going to do to incentivize the building of new homes for first-time home buyers in Manitoba. That's it.
Sure.
The Honourable First Minister.
What a joke. The Leader of the Opposition is the leader of a morally bankrupt political party on a day when history has been made for all the wrong reasons. And he comes in here to read documents that have been prepared by his team that walk him into a trap, and he doesn't even see it coming. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm not going to thank Donald Trump. I'm not going to go on a podcast and say, I would say thank you to Mr. Trump. I would say thank you. And then I'm not going to come into the House and then repeat it 6 more times or 8 more times. First time he's raised Chinese tariffs ever, even though we've been talking about this for many months, working with the ag sector and exporters. Is he going to thank you for those tariffs too? I don't know. We'll see. But the head in the sand, turn to your right and pretend to be engaged in an important conversation, doesn't work when you have to face up to the Conflict of Interest Commissioner's report. The member makes some comments about being in government. Yeah, no, I know. Let's go to the report. And I quote directly from the executive summary. On October 3rd, 2023, Manitobans voted in a provincial general election. I was there. I think all the members of the committee were there. I think we remember it quite well. Let's continue on. The sitting government of the Progressive Conservative Party was defeated. Oh, I love that first clause. Oh, it's so good. What could be better than that? Oh, here, the next clause. And a new government of the New Democratic Party was sworn in on October 18, 2023. Cabinet ministers of the defeated government remained in office between these two dates. You know who the person asking the questions is? A cabinet minister who remained in office between those dates. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is, does the member know David Philman? Yeah.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, I thank the Premier for, actually, I don't thank the Premier, and Manitobans won't thank the Premier for not answering any questions. Asked specific questions on economic growth, on development of units in the province, how many permits he's issued, why building permits are down under this NDP, and he doesn't want to answer. He wants to talk about a joke. Well, if you wanted to talk about what is a joke, I think the Premier just needs to look in the mirror. And he won't see his own record too far behind him. I will go on the Premier's criminal record. If we want to talk about records and we want to talk about the past, we can talk about the Premier's criminal record.
Order, please. Can you please tie the commentary back to the topic at hand in estimates, please? Thank you.
Shapes to where the Premier is and his ability to answer the questions here today. The Premier's criminal record will speak to himself on his ability to answer questions and think this is a joke. His ability to attack members and bully members while we're sitting here, while he's heckling us here. You can see in the chamber where he does it over and over again. He wants to heckle and control and bully and intimidate. It's exactly what's happening here today. The purpose of committee is to ask questions, and he's heckling me here again. Let's move this mic over here. Maybe we can get the Premier caught on there. Yeah, so there you go. So now Manitobans can hear the Premier, and we'll hear the Premier heckle some more in committee here today. Asking serious questions about the economy. Manitobans are worried under this NDP government. We've tabled in the House dozens and dozens of reports where Manitobans are paying more under this NDP government, where the finance minister himself, where the media has called him a sloppy, end quote, for not including the rebates for Manitobans, where Manitobans are paying more now under this NDP government, where building permits, as I mentioned, are down month over month, year over year under this NDP, where unemployment is up to 6%, under this NDP, where non-residential building permits are down under this NDP, education property taxes are up under this NDP, over $300 million taxed under this NDP government. And I hope Manitobans can hear the Premier heckling once again on the mic. Yeah, that's who he is. He's a bully. He's a bully. It's clear as day, he's a bully. Manitobans will see this. He operates his caucus this way. He operates his personal life this way. We can just look back to the Premier's past and see this. He's nothing but a bully. Nothing but a bully that the Premier wants to say. Now the Premier is trying to, I don't know, emotionally attack me for saying that I've cried in the House. Yeah, I don't care. So what? It's actually, there's nothing wrong with a man having emotions. There's nothing wrong with a man. I mean, this is the toxicity that his own friend, former friend, says about him. The toxicity, the bullying by this Premier. The member for Fort Garry, Said it over and over again that he's a bully. He's toxic. That's who he is. That's who he is. And he's trying to shame me here for saying that, yeah, I've cried in the chamber. So what?
Crocodile tears.
So what? And now he's calling me a liar? Saying crocodile tears? I mean, Manitobans are really going to see this premier for who he is. And just 2 weeks on the job, I'm already under his skin, already in his head. Already he can see the wheels falling off the bus. And he wants to go on a report where I'm not mentioned in it, I'm not listed in it, and yet he wants to attack me for it. And it's embarrassing to see, you got the Minister of Justice here heckling. You got all these guys sitting on the other side that they think they can bully. They think they can intimidate. It's not going to work. The numbers are clear as day. Manitoba is worse off under this NDP. Life is less affordable under this NDP. People are paying more under this NDP. Crime is up. Healthcare wait times are higher.
That's why he hasn't got
The Minister of Health has a D- from one of their biggest supporters. The nurses union gave them a D-. So I'll ask the Premier again, can he please provide some details on residential units, how many residential units are being created, and how many builders are receiving his fake, I guess, tax credits, since they haven't got that yet for the rental properties.
The Honourable First Minister.
Oh man, I feel for the PC caucus. Your party stuck you with this leader, and wow. Yeah, no, I really feel for the members of the PC caucus. I mean, basic policy issues. The rebate on the retail sales tax for people building rental units is different than the homeowner's affordability tax credit. These are important policy considerations that somebody who wants to lead a province should be able to distinguish. Heckling comes from the opposite side. That's fine. That's all they got. What are they going to say about the fact that Heather Stephenson, the person that they all supported as leader, was just fined 18 grand today? Unemployment, Manitoba ranks well compared to the other provinces. You're talking about inflation, it's way better today than it was under the PCs. Let those words sink in. Crime down. And that's why the member for Brandon West has been sitting down for the past 4 weeks. Every day he was getting up. Every day he was getting up. Hasn't been a question on crime in weeks. Healthcare, thousands more people working on the front lines. Confidence in government, which is the foundation for an effective economy. To have a capitalist system, you need to have a government that can appropriately enforce contract law. That is a requirement. The ability for a government to enforce contract law comes from them having moral standing. Yes, that is accurate. And for a government to lose that moral standing by, say, violating constitutional principles and conventions is a severe threat to the Manitoba and Canadian economy. So again, this Conflict of Interest Commissioner's report, which does invoke the member opposite, I hate to break it to him, hasn't seen it yet, I guess, but sort of talking in circles in a scrum without knowing what to make of it. He should know that this report says that every single cabinet minister, himself included, was required to know what the Caretaker Convention was in the summer of 2023. So every single member of the PC caucus who sat in the cabinet knew what the Caretaker Convention was. They were specifically briefed on it, they were specifically reminded of it, and they were directed that they had to understand that it was their responsibility to uphold the Caretaker Convention. And yet it was violated multiple times, we see today. So I asked the member opposite. The economy is really strong and in good hands because we don't thank Donald Trump, unlike him. He loves Donald Trump because, well, one minute when Justin Trudeau was in the blackface scandal, he was posting selfies with him because maybe he thought that was going to get him some support at the time. But then 2 years later, he's running around with the PCs. They don't like Justin Trudeau, so he changes his colors, and all of a sudden, oh, thank you, Donald Trump. Whatever. I mean, the words of an irrelevant actor still bear repeating on the record in the case of the Leader of the Opposition, because this report of the Conflict of Interest Commissioner said that it was his responsibility to uphold the Caretaker Convention, and he was specifically briefed and reminded of this in August 2023. It's a global discussion, And there is no formal intervention here. There's not a point of order, no matter of privilege. And so this is very relevant. We are an executive council. I'm talking about the president of the executive council who just broke the law. 18 grand fine, first time in history. So the member opposite, filibustering himself, getting worked up, describing his internal emotional states, better known as qualia, when we're talking about the philosophical inquiries of the mind. Let's bring it back to brass tacks. Do you know David Philman through the chair? Does he know David Philman? Why is David Philman in this report?
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I guess the Premier still thinks he's in opposition. He wants to ask questions and not answer any questions. Maybe he should start answering questions. I mean, he'll be back in opposition shortly, so another 2 years he'll be back here and he'll be right back at it. The pit bull attack dog that he is, the toxic bullying leader that he is, from his own members, from former members, from past relationships, from cab drivers to ex-partners to MLAs. Everyone can see that this Premier is nothing but a bully. He wants to attack. He talks about heckling and within the House. Well, it's funny to note, maybe the Premier can go back, or his nightmare chief of staff, as he likes to call him, can go.
Order. The First Minister on a point of order.
Point of order, but just want to point out that the title is not Nightmare Chief of Staff. It's in reference to our Chief of Staff, who is the Tories' worst nightmare. And I encourage all the members opposite, grinning or looking dejected as they do, to read the report, and you'll see plenty of proof as to why he is your worst nightmare.
The Leader of the Official Opposition, would you like to respond to this alleged point of order? Sorry, we're still on the point of order. Okay, sorry. Then the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. And in our last committee here, it was clear that the Premier can make up whatever names he wants for his staff. So we call him the Manitoba's Nightmare, because he is Manitoba's Nightmare. He's advising this Premier. So if the Premier can make up a title for him, we will also make up a title for him and call him Manitoba's Worst Nightmare, who leads the puppet strings on this Premier. So no point of order. Premier admits himself it's not a point of order.
So as already established, just officially on record, that was not a point of order. Moving back to the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Tories' worst nightmare.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Like I said, the Premier's Chief of Staff, Manitoba's worst nightmare, who under his leadership has made cost of living higher than it's ever been in this province, increased education property taxes to historic rates, all under this nightmare of a Chief of Staff for Manitobans who advises his Premier directly. So when we talk about heckling and moral standing and moral high ground, coming from a Premier who has numerous run-ins with the law, numerous run-ins with the justice system, and he wants to stand up here and talk about moral high ground and standings. It's interesting to know the behavior of his colleagues. Over 20 heckling points of order called to 1. 20 to 1, and here we go again. Premier still heckling, still talking, trying to overtalk me. But that's okay. That's what he does. What he needs to realize is I actually don't care how much he heckles me. He can heckle me all he wants. I think it's fantastic. And now he wants to bully and talk about facial expressions and insult me for whatever he feels like he thinks he can insult me for. That's fine. We're going to take the high ground. I don't need to insult him. I'm just going to talk about the facts. And the facts on him are he's a bully. The facts on him, he's not answering any questions. And we want to talk about moral high ground and ethics. Let's take a look at some of these by this NDP government. Let's take a look at the NDP pointing fingers on ethics. The Natural Resource Minister and Indigenous Futures violated ethics rules when his store received government contracts. Can maybe the Premier comment on if he sold those stores like he said he would? The NDP have no business pointing the finger on ethics when their leader has received a complaint for creating a toxic workplace. environment through bullying and abusive language, exactly what we're seeing here today. Has he taken anti-harassment training yet? We'll find out if he answers that question. And still before the Ethics Commissioner, there's still a report waiting to come out from the Ethics Commissioner that the leader confessed he flew on a private charter jet twice and never once reported that. That's a violation. Talk about ethics, moral high ground. And when I asked the Premier numerous times in our last committee, will he provide proof of payment? Nope. Will he show Manitobans that he paid for it personally? Nope. Will he show an invoice? No. Will he show a check that he wrote that was cashed? No. I mean, when you want to talk about morality, the high grounds and ethics, I think the Premier, again, once again, needs to look in the mirror. And when he looks in the mirror tonight and he sees that smug, arrogant smile looking back at him, he will say, wow, I am not the right person for this job. I have no morality as the Premier of Manitoba. I mean, there's on and on, but we only have a minute left here, so I'm gonna move on to the question. And then we can get back to more, because I got about 5 pages of ethics violations against this Premier, so we can go into that. We can go into that afterwards. I'll ask the Premier a question on a hiring he's done here in Manitoba. So the Premier, can he confirm for us if Daniel Blakey is still an employee of the government and Executive Council, and what his salary is? What does he do for the Premier, and how does he advise the Premier? Very simple question. There's been multiple questions throughout this. Maybe he wants to take a stab at if he's going to provide Manitobans with proof of his payment for taking a private plane. Maybe he's going to talk about you know, the economy and unemployment, 6% on the Premier. But simple is, Daniel Blakey, still employee. How much does he make, and how does he advise the Premier?
So I didn't want to interrupt the Leader of the Official Opposition, but earlier there was made reference to political staff and just a general guidance to everyone on both sides that political staff should not be drawn into the debate.
Jump in there.
The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, thank you, Honourable Chair, for that direction there. Okay, so here's how it's gonna go, guys. I'm gonna go waste a bunch of time in estimates asking these questions. I'm reading for a script, and then when I get the heat put back on me by the Premier, I'm gonna turn and pretend to be engaged deeply in conversation. And then as long as he talks, just no matter what's going on, just keep engaging me in conversation. Seemed like a good strategy, I guess, when you're working it up in the PC caucus room, but I think today of all days, let's have a real discussion about issues that matter. You want to talk about the economy? Great. In order for contract law to be enforced, there needs to be a government with proper moral standing. The PCs destroyed their own ability through the landfill ads and the anti-trans ads, and the Manitobans rejected them. And then even after they lost power, what did they do? Well, very clear, painstaking detail, they violated the Caretaker Convention. When the member gets an opportunity to read the report, he's going to see the Conflict of Interest Commissioner say that this undermines the legitimacy of government. If you want to talk about the economy, I would say through the chair, anyone needs to be able to explain why a progressive conservative government would undermine the legitimacy of government and therefore call into question their ability to enforce the proper functioning of the market. There's a lot that the member is going to learn in the coming months as leader, maybe years if he's lucky. He doesn't currently have the amount of support necessary to survive a leadership review at a political convention, but maybe that will change in time. And so what I would say is there's a couple good rules of thumb that he should keep in mind. One would be no staff. You could attack me all you want. I kind of enjoy it. I like the back and forth, the cut and thrust and jive of question period. I signed up for it. I enjoy it. But when you invoke people who can't respond on the record, it's a low blow. Plus, it sets a dangerous precedent. Inevitably, the winds of political change will blow, probably more than a decade from now, based on the current trajectory of the PCs and their abysmal fundraising. But at some point, it will change. And at that future date, you don't want your staffers to become the target. It's kind of like the golden rule, right? So whether you abide by the golden rule or not, I think it's a good strategy. Just leave the staff out of it. Take all the shots you want at myself. Similarly, no kids. Don't bring up people's kids in question period. Don't bring up people's kids on the record. Don't bring up people's kids in ads. Don't bring up people's kids when you're doing political hits. I'm saying this to the member for Brandon West through you, the chair. I understand that last week the member for Brandon West asked a number of inappropriate questions, saying on the record those members which have children. He's new here, so perhaps he doesn't appreciate how dangerous it is to invoke people's children.
Order, please. Due to the fact that this matter is currently under advisement with the speaker, we can't address it here in estimates.
The point is made?
Back to the Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, 100%. No, the point is made, and, you know, everyone can learn. Everyone can learn. And so, you know, the member from the outside looks like a decent person, but again, sitting there with the smug expression trying to heckle back now, like, doesn't make any sense. Just take the L. You got some bad advice. You asked a question that was inappropriate. Don't do it again. So I'm going to table the slides that the member for Fort White was provided about the Caretaker Convention. He knew. He was told by the former clerk of the Executive Council that it was his responsibility to uphold this. Every single member of that former cabinet was. So why'd they do it? Why did they participate? Member for Riding Mountain, you know, he would know something about this as well too. He was there, Minister of the Crown in August 2023. Shameful. Shameful violation of the core principle of our democracy. So the member opposite knew full well about the Caretaker Convention. It stands to reason that he knew very well about all these violations that are documented in this report. But again, does he know David Philman? I think the people of Manitoba should know an answer to that. We see a long list of donors year over year with the PCs who continue to persist, and I gotta say, the fact that every time a PC government leaves office, they do so under a cloud of suspicion, and in this case, outright wrongdoing, proved beyond a shadow of a doubt. There's probably certain narratives that form in the minds of people here in Manitoba. So yeah, let's have a fulsome discussion of these issues. Does the member know David Philman?
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. I actually appreciate the Premier's comments on that, and I will follow suit. If the Premier wants to leave staff out of it, then I have no problem leaving staff out of it. I believe the Premier is the one that brought his Chief of Staff into this conversation when he first introduced him. A point of order was made at that point with the title he had given him. It was ruled it wasn't a point of order, so another name was given to him by our side. Premier gave him a name, but if he wants to leave the Chief of Staff out of this and staff out of it, that's no problem. I think it's actually the right thing to do, and we don't have to go that way again if the Premier commits today to leaving staff out of it. So that's fine. We can do that. When it comes to asking questions and answering questions, Premier is the one that is supposed to be answering questions for Manitobans. Manitobans have a right to know. I've asked them dozens of questions in here in the chamber, refuses to answer. The last one was a very simple one. It's about Daniel Blakey. Big press announcement went out when he was hired. I've asked the Premier if Daniel Blakey is still an employee of the government and Executive Council and what his salary is. What does he do for the Premier and how does he advise the Premier? Not a very hard question if you hire someone. Not a hard question when the Premier has gone out and made a big announcement about hiring him and yet doesn't want to engage in that question. I've asked the Premier again questions on developments, permits, GDP, education property taxes, how seniors are going to pay their property bills, education property tax bills under this government when the $1,500 tax credit was left off. Premier doesn't want to answer any of those questions. So Manitobans can see that this Premier is surely just wasting time. He wants to bring up the Caretaker Convention and talk about a report that was just tabled today. And he wants to bring me into it. I from the quick glance that I've had out of the 100+ pages, I don't believe I mentioned it. Maybe the Premier can say if I mentioned in it. I don't think I mentioned in it. I don't know if he's read it or not, or if his staff has read it. If they can advise that, I'm not in the report. I have said that we accept the rulings of the Commissioner. I don't know what else the Premier is asking when it comes to that question. I don't know where he's going on this. Maybe he can clarify that and stop his obsession with PC members or PC donors in the past. I don't understand where he's going with that, but what I do know is that it is our job as the opposition to ask questions of this government to get answers from Manitobans. So I'll ask the Premier again, if he can comment, please confirm if Daniel Blakey is still an employee of the government and Executive Council, and what his salary is. What does he do for the Premier, and how does he advise the Premier? A very simple question. The Premier can hopefully answer that. We can move forward. We can leave staff out of this, and we can have a fulsome discussion at committee like we're supposed to do.
The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, it's sad when the opposition filibusters their own time and estimates. It's a testament to the weakness of preparation or strategy on their side. Daniel Blakey, yeah, we put out a message to the public saying we hired him and he still works for us. He does a great job. Salary is publicly disclosed. I mean, what are we doing here? You're filibustering your own time. The opposition, I'm saying royally to you as a collective. You show up late. What more do you want? I mean, we can keep doing this for sure, but again, all the people who violated the Caretaker Convention, the member opposite included, would know that running a government takes a lot of hours out of the day. I think this time would better be spent serving the people of Manitoba. But hey, that's just me. I'll keep coming back if you want to keep doing this over and over again. You know, you can cede your time to members from other political persuasions. You know, you can filibuster yourself. That's fine. You can keep asking questions with long preambles to filibuster your own time. Questionable public value. But again, all cabinet ministers were reminded by the clerk's office that it was their responsibility to review the presentation and to understand its requirements, quote, end quote. It's verbatim from the report. The member opposite was a minister of the Crown. Daniel Blakey does great work for us. He's bringing home the bag on many topics. The Northern Water Pollution Control Center is one example. What does this member do for the well-connected Tory insiders? Why do we keep hearing names like Philman and Stephenson over and over again from generation to generation? How does that inspire trust in the general public? One of these people who's named, they have a whole section in this report with a title header that is attributed as a quote to this person. This person is a large donor to the PC party last year, after the landfill ads, after the anti-trans ads. This person still decided to donate. Maybe donated to the members' leadership contest. I don't know. The last name Stephenson shows up in their donations again. So, I could tell you that the NDP is a party above merit. It's a party that's open to everybody. One of my favorite stories is the fact that we had somebody who dropped out of high school to work to support their family, worked their way up as a shop steward from the manufacturing floor, and went on to become the finance minister of this province in the 1980s. Eugene Costera, great guy. PCs, though, like one of the takeaways from this report is there's a revolving door of last names in the PC party that keeps rearing their head generation after generation. And now, just as the Philman government left office with the MTS scandal hanging over their head, in which a former premier is alleged to have made quite a tidy sum, and also with the vote rigging scandal left hanging over their head. Now we have the Stephenson government leaving office with this, not allegation, but documentation, proof, settled fact that they broke the law and they violated a constitutional principle. Let's show up and let's have a litigation of these issues. I'm more than game for it. Members opposite want to heckle, they want to taunt. I don't mind taking a few shots to my personal reputation in order to stand up for our democracy. You want to make personal animus a part of this game? Great. I've been called worse things by far better people. Brian Pallister, whoa, he called me terrible things in this very same committee, right? I think everybody remembers that. I'm fine. I'm happy to continue on with this because there is a fundamental problem with the PCs. It is exposed here. We see it each and every day with the, oh, today a new day starts, and let me start heckling 2 seconds later in QP, to the, oh, tough on crime, law and order, to, I got nothing to say about Heather Stephenson's violations. There's a rot and there's a hypocrisy that is made worse by the moral attitude of condescension towards other Manitobans that we see on display from the PC party. There is a repugnant character to the violation of our Constitution that is amplified by the fact that this amazing charter that we have that is supposed to empower the rights of all people is repeatedly targeted by the PCs to vilify Indigenous people and to bully, to use the members' terminology, members of the LGBTQ community.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. So I asked the Premier a question on Daniel Blakey, staffer of his. He didn't say how much he makes, but a quick glance, it started at $130,000. That was 8 months ago. So he says he does work for the Premier, does report to the Premier, and he is delivering, is exactly what the Premier said, quote, in his last answer. So if he works for the Premier, gets paid over $100,000 to work for the Premier, you think that there would be some sort of correspondence or communication with the Premier in his office. Makes sense to think. The Premier just said he works for him, said he reports to him. So I will read from a FIPA request. Requested a FIPA request for all briefing notes, reports, and correspondence between the Premier, Senior Advisor on Intergovernmental Affairs, Daniel Blakey, and the Premier, Wab Kinew himself. But
Point of order. The First Minister on this point of order.
Yeah. No, thanks, Chair. I think you know where I'm going with this one, but just want to remind the member by asking you for a ruling that you're not to refer to people who are members of the Chamber, members of the Legislative Assembly by their given names. You're supposed to use their ministerial title, constituency, MLA name. I know it's difficult day to be a member of the PC caucus, and so you get a little rattled and you forget some of these basic rules of engagement, but just want to softly and gently put that reminder onto the record by asking that rule be respected.
The Leader of the Official Opposition, would you like to respond to this point of order? Okay, we'll just take a moment. Thank you. So that is in fact a point of order, and just I'd like to remind the Leader of the Official Opposition that it's Honourable First Minister or the Premier. So back to who at the top? Leader of Official Opposition, back to you on your time.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. So as I was saying, FIPA request was put in for briefing notes, reports, and correspondence between the Premier, Senior Advisor, and on Intergovernmental Affairs, Daniel Blakey, and the Premier. But the response came back saying that there were no records between April 1st, 2024 and December 31st, 2024. So paying Mr. Blakey over $100,000 for over 8 months has not produced a single document according to his own government. So I asked the Premier, he says last answer, he said Mr. Blakey is working for him, Mr. Blakey is doing work. I said, question follow-up is, what type of work is Mr. Blakey doing if there hasn't been one document from Mr. Blakey and the Premier's office? Why is there no paper trail for all the work this special advisor is doing? Or is the Premier hiding something from Manitobans? Or is the Premier just paying his friend, Mr. Blakey, to sit at home and do nothing and collect a paycheck on the backs of Manitobans? After 8 months, you think there'd be at least one document. You think that there'd be at least one document produced by Mr. Blakey, and there's nothing. So if the Premier can add some clarity to that, that would be great. And I know the Premier wants to continue to go on the Caretaker convention, and he wants to bring up ministers. I'm not listening there. Premier can attack me all he wants. He thinks that he's scoring points by attacking me. I know he wants to fight Heather Stephenson, and he wants to fight people that are no longer here it's in this premier's blood to fight and assault people and bully people, and that's what he wants to do, it's not going to work on me. So if the premier can simply answer the question when it comes to Mr. Blakey, the lack of documents and FIPA requests that showed up with zero communication from Mr. Blakey and the premier himself.
The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, I don't know who's going to go tell the member for Red River North. I don't know if the member for Riding Mountain is going to break it to him. It's going to be the member for Brandon West. Sorry, pal, the leader of the PC caucus doesn't know that you're still an MLA. Members there going on and on about, people in the past, la, 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 la. It's his government. He got the briefing on the Caretaker Convention. A member of his caucus was just fined. First time in Manitoba history. He celebrated Heather Stephenson. Sit in the front row, ask questions of the premier, embarrass yourself further after losing government. Yeah, we're going to go on the Conflict of Interest Commissioner report like for several years to come, I would say. Precedent setting, terrible in all the bad ways. So yeah, just want to apologize to the member for Red River North that the leader of your caucus doesn't know that you're still an MLA. That's gotta hurt. Surprised he didn't get up to ask a question today. Obviously, I'm being a little sarcastic there. Yeah. But maybe he'll get up in the House soon. We'll see. Also, while we're sort of kicking the member opposite while he's down, I'll say that how long ago was it that he agreed not to attack staff before he started asking questions about Mr. Blakey? Was it 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 7 minutes? I don't know. Second ago, he's gonna put his foot forward, his version of moral uprightness and certitude, and I'll follow the premier's intervention and not attack staff. By the way, Daniel Blakey sitting at home? Like what? No, he's not sitting at home. He's working hard every day. The North End Water Pollution Control Center, critical piece of infrastructure that the PCs were unsuccessful in getting done during their time in office. Daniel Blakey has brought a very, very complicated, I'll say, piece of funding together to pay for that. Many other examples that we could point to. Point to each of our staff, and we could say they're doing a great job, and here are the ways in which they have made a difference for you, the people of Manitoba, predominantly on healthcare and affordability. Unfortunately, when we look at the PC staff, I'm not talking about anyone today, but it's the people in this report, I don't know. It's gonna take some time, work our way through all this stuff. Pretty rough. So yeah, the members opposite, again, haven't won an election without Brian Pallister in something like 30 years. Leave office under a cloud of scandal every time Manitobans show them the door. Like, what is it about the PC party ethos that makes that happen time and time again? Well, again, you read this report here today, improperly advancing a private interest. A section, did we get it done today? Direct quote. Who's asking the question? PC party donor. PC party donor who shares the last name of a former premier. Why does the PC party continue to just recycle the same old, same old? Well, again, I think a lot of people get involved in politics because they think it's bad when it's just the same old tired insiders doing things for each other, scratching each other's backs. So, pretty conclusive piece of evidence right here. And what's changed since the terrible landfill ad election campaign? Same candidates, same campaign staff. Won't mention their names, but everybody knows what I'm talking about. So again, nothing to do with me. Like we saw the member opposite start off with this when they were still in government, and we'd be like, oh yeah, Brian Pallister. Nope, I didn't close the emergency room. I had nothing to do with it. It's always a like me first mentality. Member for Red River North saw that. His leader doesn't even know he's still an MLA. having a tough enough day as it is, gets kicked while he's down by his leader. It's tough. And again, when we're talking about insiders, people doing things to scratch each other's back, let's not forget this member decided to run after getting a sweetheart deal from Heather Stephenson. $500K when other businesses were really, really struggling because the government was shutting them down. Plus ça change, plus ça reste la même.
The leader of the official.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. It's funny how the Premier thinks that asking a question when you're in opposition is somewhat attacking staff. Asking a question about what's the staff done for him, how much does the staff make by this NDP government and members opposite is an attack. It's our job to ask questions. If they don't like answering questions, then don't take the job. It's our job to, it's not an attack to ask a question on, if he works for you, what does he do? If he gets paid over $130,000, what does he do? And if he reports to you, like you said he does, where are the reports? Where's the information? Nothing in 8 months with the FIPA request. That's not an attack, it's asking a question. We're asking questions, Premier doesn't want to talk about it. Premier wants to continue on what he believes to be his moral high horse or ethics, given his brutal past himself, given the past of his members on his side of the House. We've got through a few of them, but let's bring them back again. Some new ones. This Premier himself seems to forget that he is currently being investigated by the Ethics Commissioner.
Order. Since that matter is currently under advisement, I need to ask the member to refrain from referring to it here in estimates. Okay, the leader of the official opposition.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, and to quote the Premier, point's been made. So I'll move on to the next one. This Premier himself wants to continue to heckle and bully. And now I know you can't hear it at home, but he's sitting there saying, call him dad, call him dad. I don't know, maybe that's what he gets his members to call him. Maybe that's what he gets, you know, people around Manitoba to call him. Maybe staffers call him dad. You know, we know what he has said to people who train in MMA with him, which talk to his leadership and his toxicity. His comments that he said about jiu-jitsu fighters and MMA fighters when they're wrestling. I don't know if the Premier wants to go down that path. Maybe he can repeat them here today for everybody. If the Premiers feel so inclined to take a trip down memory lane, maybe some of his colleagues want to talk about the language the Premier uses. I've never used that type of language. The language I've used is that I love my son. I love my son more than anything, and parents love their kids more than anything. And as a parent, we have a right to know what's going on in our children's lives. I love my kid. I won't comment on anyone else. But that's where we'll go with that. Premier wants to talk about taking the moral high ground, and yet he just continues to insult and attack and put falsehoods on the record, and he just wants to avoid answering any questions. Asked about education property taxes, won't answer. Asked about GDP growth, won't answer. Asked about investments in the province, he won't answer. Asked about building permits, he won't answer. Asked about what staff do, he won't answer. Asked about simple things like will he provide a proof of payment for a flight he took, won't provide it. What is the Premier hiding? He wants to talk about ethics and morals, and yet he won't answer any of the questions himself. So you have to ask yourself, what is he doing? Yeah, he says it really got him here. Yep. Well, until he tables those things, until he brings those items forward, no matter what he says, no one actually knows what he's doing. So we'll get to another question here, and maybe the Premier can actually answer this one. The Premier's finance minister is making Manitobans wait for their $1,500 homeowners affordability rebate until they can fix their sloppy rollout of this. It's sad that Manitobans are now being hit with bills at historical highs and not getting the rebates that this Premier talked about. The Premier was on the record and said in Toronto, maybe he was trying to impress his newfound love for Conservative leader Doug Ford. I don't know. Maybe the Premier's making a run for federal leadership and he wants to warm up with everybody here. Who knows? But he did say every Manitoban will get a $1,600 paycheck or $1,600 check. Asked him to end question period, will every Manitoban get that? Just repeated his quote, won't answer it. Maybe he'll answer it today. Maybe he'll tell us today, is every Manitoban getting a $1,600 check? Finance Minister. Sorry. Yeah, I guess we'll just end it. I know you said reset the clock, so we'll just
No,
end
no,
there.
no,
So
it's okay.
I'll just end on, will the Premier tell Manitoba State, as he said in Toronto, that every Manitoban will get a $1,600 rebate check? Simple question for the Premier. It's a simple yes or no answer.
The Honorable First Minister?
Yeah, every time I see Doug Ford, he's always like, Wob, you're actually a PC. I'm going to convince you of it. But after today, like, no. Like, the PCs in Manitoba are terrible. Look at this report. Yuck. Heather Stephenson? Well, how did it turn so dark and mean-spirited? You know what I mean? Like, you meet Heather, whatever, and then next thing you know, they're running anti-trans ads and the landfill ads, and then they're violating a constitutional principle to respect the electorate, respect your votes. How did that happen? That's so bizarre. It's really dark. I do, like on the question of morality, I do want to call the member out though, when he's like, oh shucks, I'm just talking about myself as a parent. No, he knows exactly what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing with the parental rights anti-trans campaign. And I'll tell you firsthand from having knocked on doors in swing ridings in the last election, which for the record are not going to be swing ridings anymore. We're looking at swing ridings in rural Manitoba this time around. They say anti-trans, but when you get to the doorstep, it's LGBT. They don't have the courage to go out and say something anti-LGBT. They won't say something offensive to a gay man. They won't say something offensive to a bisexual person. They won't say something offensive to a lesbian. But they detect a vulnerability when it comes to trans people, and they use that as the thin edge of the wedge to get in there. And so, yeah, I do call out the member. Purposely trying to misrepresent, mislead. I'll search for your guidance on the appropriate verbiage here, but there is an awareness of the cynical nature of what is going on. Manitobans see through it. They saw those ads and they said, no, it's not for us. And now it's, oh, you know, I'm just talking about myself as a parent. Look down the committee. He is your colleague. He is a Manitoban. Now hang your head in shame. Shakes his head no, because he wants to be able to go back to the anti-trans rhetoric in the next campaign. We defeated them on the landfill issue because we recovered the bodies of 2 women. They were biting their tongue and remaining quiet because they wanted to say that the landfill search was a failure a few years from now. Thankfully, Creator willing, that was not the case, and we are bringing these 2 women home. And now, the member opposite, same thing with the anti-trans stuff. But the thing about him, the same guy, selfie with Justin Trudeau one day, thank you Donald Trump the next day, you know what's going to happen, right? When you're at the PC gala, well, it's probably not a gala anymore, it's probably like a PC basement party, whatever that, you know, is going on there. A lot smaller because Wally's not the leader. It's going to be, oh, you're trans and, you know, kids and da-da-da-da-da, blowing that same dog whistle that was blown about gay men in the 1980s. The exact same allegations. Not true. Trans people, good people. Moral leaders have a responsibility to bring people together in society. You know who failed that? Heather Stephenson. Smoking gun. Documentation. Now the member newly squeaked by the convoluted leadership strata that was designed by the same donors to make sure that a city PC would get in instead of the rural base. Oh yeah, no, we got the strategy. We're gonna keep asking these same questions and da-da-da-da-da. Like, nah, man. You picked the wrong guy. You're going to talk about quotes from the past. I'll tell you about a quote from about an hour ago. This member asked about the mine being jammed through by a government that lost power, and I quote, I honestly can't comment on the mining project because I wasn't a minister, end quote. I wasn't a minister. I wasn't a minister. This is public commentary. You know, I'm sure it'll be in the media. Confused PC leader does not remember being a minister of the crown. That would be the headline, except nobody cares. What is serious? They violated the caretaker principle.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Chair. I mean, the Premier's just spent 5 minutes talking about absolutely nothing. Didn't answer any of the questions that I answered.
Order.
Yeah.
The Honorable First Minister on a point of order.
Yeah, I just want to say that, you know, although I recognize at the outset this is not a point of order, I think it's important when we call out bigotry, including anti-trans rhetoric, that we acknowledge that that's not nothing. Member can engage in the wedge politics that he has so far failed to use effectively, and I'll keep calling him out. And then again with his post a selfie with Justin Trudeau one day, thank Donald Trump the next day. You know what's going to happen next? He's going to try and show up at the Pride Parade. Oh, you got to understand what it's like. Oh, no, Heather made me do it. Da, da, da. Please let me be at the Pride Parade. So I'm just saying, I want these words on the record.
The Leader of the Official Opposition on the point of order.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Chair. If the Premier let me finish, and to his own acknowledgement, he recognizes it's not a point of order. If he let me finish this, there's absolutely nothing about the question I asked. But in his bullying fashion, like he always does, he cut me off before I could finish the sentence, just like he does with the quotes he wants to read. Half-truths, smoke and mirrors by this Premier. It's not a point of order, according to him himself, and it's not a point of order, period.
So as already mentioned, this is not a point of order. Back to the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, Honorable Deputy Chair, I would like to just cede the floor to the member from Fort Garry until 5 p.m.
not
today.
Again. Oh, man. Weak sauce.
The member for Fort Garry.
I wasn't.
Thank you. Now, Premier, yesterday in question period, the Premier had said this, and I'll quote, "When it comes to folks across Manitoba, 100% of Manitobans are better off today because you've got a government that adequately funds education." Now, the Premier would know that Manitoba used to fund about 80% of the education system through general revenue, and the last 20% came from education property taxes. There used to be teacher librarians in every school. There used to be nurses in every school. There used to be lab technicians in high school science labs. Class sizes were much smaller. In fact, if you compare 20 years ago, the education system to now, it's night and day. And the reason it's like that, it's because of chronic underfunding, which has been going on for years. And school boards have had to raise education property taxes to make up provincial shortfalls. And over the years, education property taxes have become a larger part of how we fund education. And in my riding, Pembina Trails, the parents now pay more in education property tax to fund their children's schools than the province actually contributes from general revenue. It's now over 50% that they pay through education property tax. The same is true with St. James Assiniboia. So when school divisions have to use education property taxes to pay for more of their school system than the province contributes, my question to the Premier is, does he still consider that adequately funded education?
The Honourable First Minister.
The questions that come to a government are ones that have to be answered in a specific context. And in this context, we're taking office after years of underfunding and cuts by the morally bankrupt former PC administration. And so again, we're increasing funding. If you look at many of the school divisions, since taking office, they've received double-digit increases. And on top of that, you can add the Universal School Food Program funding. Repairing the damage of an irresponsible, morally bankrupt, progressive conservative administration will not be accomplished overnight. It's a balancing act of looking at what the needs are for the education system with what the affordability challenges are for the average homeowner and Manitoban, looking at what the other needs are across government. And so when we come to questions in education specifically, which the member's asking about, or in other important priority areas like healthcare, for example. We have to strive to strike a balance between responsible fiscal stewardship and improving the public services that have been decimated by the former PC government. Why exactly the PCs did this? Like, what exactly did they believe in for so many years? They went off with Brian Pallister and they cut all these public health services and public education services. They went so far as to bring in Bill 64, which would have made the situation dramatically worse by over-centralizing a lot of these issues. And then in the last year of their mandate, the last 6 months of their mandate, they go on an unprecedented spending spree and rack up a $2 billion deficit. So did they actually believe in fiscal conservatism? Doesn't look like it, because they were willing to betray that principle after 7 years of austerity and try to fix it all in one fell swoop. But you can't fix costs held in abeyance for that long in a simple 6-month spending spree. And that's part of the challenge that our government has had. The member will know, because he pays close attention to the education system, that not only are we looking at a situation where the education system was starved, we're also talking about public service deliverers in the form of the educators, the teachers, the EAs, the school leaders, who themselves, their salaries, their wages were kept artificially low, and then tossed into a situation of province-wide bargaining, which created a new bargaining dynamic for them collectively at the same time that they were trying to get their wages met. So again, these are situations where we're trying to, I guess, respond with a multivariable calculus that says, we know that we need to increase education funding. So yeah, 100% of Manitobans are better off because we're doing that, because the kids will be the benefactors of that in the future. At the same time, we're trying to do right by the educators, because in order for us to maintain morale and increase retention, we have to have adequate compensation and the possibility of career advancement for people. At the same time, there's certain targeted areas that educators and those in the profession have been talking about for years. And the member will know the school food program is one of those things. Help kids deal with the barriers that they face before they even come to the classroom, being a refrain that I heard many times. So you put all those things together, we're making progress, still a lot more to do. But the biggest risk we could face is if the members opposite get back in power. And you see why in this report that is the subject of the political discourse today. Not only did they betray their root principles espoused as conservatives in not being fiscally responsible in any fashion whatsoever during the Heather Stephenson era, they then violated the basic democratic principles that anybody in the public sphere should respect. And it's all the same people. It's all the same people in caucus. It's all the same people in their political apparatus. Member opposite, the leader of the opposition, may not be aware that the member for Red River North is still on his team, but he is. And so, again, if these folks get into power after years of causing damage to the education system, with the exclamation point being a disrespect of the fundamental value of people's participation in elections, to me, that's pretty bad. So we're going to keep talking about it. I know the member's going to ask important questions about education, which are his right to do so, and I will endeavor to answer, but I'm going to keep talking about the Conflict of Interest Commissioner's report, because it's very, very crucial that Manitobans understand just how deep and dark things got with the Heather Stephenson administration, and why you would want to take a career in the public sphere that you were respected on, or maybe the private sphere, and attach yourself to that. Tough. And I don't mean tough like the kids say. I mean tough like how we said.
Before acknowledging the next speaker, I want to take a moment to clarify something for the committee, as this has come up once or twice this afternoon. For clarity, matters being considered by the Ethics Commissioner are not the same as matters under advisement by the Speaker. Matters under advisement by the Speaker, like the point of order raised last week in the House, may not be referred to during debate in the House or committee until the Speaker delivers his ruling. Matters being considered by the Ethics Commissioner may be discussed in debate, as there is no such prohibition on those matters being mentioned in the House or committee. The member for Fort Garry.
Thank you. I appreciate some of the Premier's analysis. I certainly agree with some of it. But the words he used in the chamber was that, in his opinion, Manitoba adequately funded education. We've now seen with school boards 10 to 25% increases in education funding. I was a 3-term school trustee and never saw double-digit increases like that. That's unprecedented. You would have to go back to the history books to see that. And they're not doing it because they're greedy. They're doing it because they have to cover their costs, which means that they're not getting enough from the province to support the education system. And yes, it's complicated because they went to central bargaining, and that basically lifted up a lot of school divisions that were not paying as much as some of the urban divisions, and there's a cost to that. But right now, the homeowners are bearing that cost. And the difference between general revenue, it's progressive taxation. School property tax is not progressive taxation. And you have a lot of seniors who are on fixed incomes, or you have newcomer families that are, have 3 generations in a home in Waverley that are just getting by. And getting these big, massive 10 to 25% hits is tough, and people are struggling. And I know that this premier is sympathetic. I know that he cares about these people and he wants to do right by them, but he had a choice. He had a policy choice. He could have upped the funding of provincial education in order to reduce the requirement for education property taxes to go up 10 to 25%, and he chose not to do that. And yet, he borrowed $340 million for a gas tax holiday that went mostly to corporations and wealthy people. So I'm wondering if the Premier can explain why he's shifting the burden onto working families of taxation, and why he's making our education system still underfunded and less fair tax-wise.
The Honourable First Minister.
Thanks. So when we talk about progressive taxation and regressive taxation, regressive tax would be something like the PCs did, where people with the biggest houses got the biggest checks. Famously, a company on Bay Street with a market cap of about $20 billion at the time got $1 million check from the government. That's regressive. Regressive, of course, in both senses of the words, regressive and bad, but also regressive in terms of a description of how the burden falls disproportionately on the poor, and then obviously the benefits disproportionately to the well-off. Progressive taxation seeks to do the opposite. The homeowner's affordability tax credit is an example of progressive taxation, which is why in trying to move away from the checks for billionaires model that we used to criticize the PCs for, we opted to go with this approach. So if you have folks who are on the lower side of the property ladder, we'll call it just for colloquial use, those folks are going to get the biggest benefit. There are more Manitobans who are not going to have to pay any sort of education property tax as a result. You can see this most clearly illustrated in rural communities. If you go to the constituencies of many of the members opposite who are trying to make noise about this, the reason why they ask about urban constituencies is because if they were to ask about their own constituencies, they'd find that 99% of their constituents would be better off. And it has to do with the differential property values in communities relative to Winnipeg. When we come to the city of Winnipeg, this progressive taxation situation is something that still makes sense. However, we have to recognize the impacts of inflation over time, the need for school funding to be addressed over time, and that's why we've taken the decision to increase the homeowner's affordability tax credit to $1,600 in the coming year. So it'll still be an example of progressive taxation by offering a tax credit to kind of address the inequity in the way that the property tax credit was previously being applied. But the ceiling of that effect will be moved upwards to help compensate for some of the effects that the member's asking about, as well as inflationary impacts and things like that. So when we're talking about adequacy, I think we have to take a global view. Yeah, we put money into people's pockets by reducing the price of gas in Manitoba. The inelasticity that we see of demand for gasoline is enough to say that over the 12-month period where this measure was in effect, emissions were not going to be impacted in a negative fashion when we're talking climate change. but affordability would be positively helped. People would have that extra $20 or $50 or however much that would work out to based on the time period that we're talking about. But again, the members in the PC caucus, what did they do to answer these questions? They mailed checks out to people. Can anyone tell you what the value of any of those checks were at this point? They spent several $billion of taxpayer money to try and curry favor in the lead up to the election. They made a bizarre decision to pivot away from economic issues and to campaign on niche wedge issues like the landfill search and the parental rights search. And I know the member knows he was just as disgusted by these ads as everyone else in the province was. And then we see in the report today that they compounded all of that disgrace and self-imposed humiliation by violating the constitutional principle of the Caretaker Convention. That's all pretty bad. And then they've chosen a leader who shows up flummoxed, unprepared, easily rattled, prattles on to filibuster his own time in here, presumably just to fly the flag that he showed up for estimates, and then he takes off. So what mission was accomplished there? When we have an opposition that asks questions that are all answered by the public record before they show up, you have a leader who cannot maintain a coherent line of inquiry.
Order, please. We can't refer to a member's presence or absence.
Right. Of course.
The Honourable First Minister.
I think what I appreciate your direction, and I think how I should have phrased it is that the member is unable to sustain a line of inquiry. And we see that from the absence of questions that are being posed by the member. So it's all pretty shameful. We're fixing the damage. We're fixing that damage when it comes to education, when it comes to affordability. But I do invite the member to take a close look at this. Precedent is being set in many important ways, and this cloud is going to hang over the PCs for a long, long time. And rightfully so. Just actions that were taken to advance a private interest, terrible.
The member's time has expired. The member for Fort Garry.
Yes, thank you. So when the homeowners affordability tax credit was initially proposed, the government made the claim that 84% of Manitoba homeowners would be sort of better off under this plan, but it was based on the average home being $285,000 or below. In April of 2025, the average home price in Manitoba is $403,000 and plus, and it increased 5.5% from the previous year. And we're seeing that every year, 5-6% increases in home values, which means nobody lives in a $285,000 home, or very few people do. And we heard a stat from the City of Winnipeg that 130,000 properties now in the City of Winnipeg alone is above the threshold, which means people are paying a lot more. So I'm wondering, I have two questions here for the Premier. The 84% number is no longer valid. What is the accurate number, given the math of how many homes would be better off under this plan? And in the next couple of years, with increasing home prices, that number is going to shrink and get smaller and smaller. And then my second follow-up question is, will the Premier commit to returning education funding to 80% from general revenue and getting it back down to 20% for education property taxes?
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you. I appreciate the question. The member is asking about education, which is an important priority for both of us. I would offer just at the outset, before I get into the substance of it, just a bit of caution on one of the stats that he's citing. The number from the city that is being pointed to there includes commercial properties. So there's a bit of, I think, mix-up that's happened in some of the reporting there. So the number, and this is not due to the fault of the member, this has to do with probably how it's being shared in the media or from other channels. We're looping in folks who are not, well, entities which are not supposed to get the homeowners affordability tax credit. So the number is going to be smaller. Unfortunately, I don't have the number at my disposal because we don't have the City of Winnipeg's data in hand at this point, but we can follow up on that point if there's a desire at the committee to do so. Now, when it comes to the impacts of rising home prices, when it comes to the related impact of inflation, decisions that are made by the school divisions, the school boards, as we would say colloquially, that is why we're increasing the homeowners affordability tax credit, is to respond to those impacts. So when we were first designing this $1,500 tax credit, $1,500, nice round number, it sounds great. Who wouldn't want a $1,500 tax credit? We did the analysis based on, data that we had from the finance department, and we compared it, okay? First of all, the starting point, this is an example of progressive taxation because folks on one end of the property ladder will be able to see the greatest benefit relative to their peers who are on the other side, the other end, I should say, for consistency. And then we looked at it further. We compared it to what the PCs were doing with their checks for billionaires and that approach that we were very critical of in opposition. And so we figured this was a good policy to implement because here's a way that we can deliver affordability help related to education property taxes in a way that is fair for people, particularly the people who need the help the most, which it's not a perfect correlation, but it's a rough correlation that folks who would get the most benefit would be the ones that the $1,500 number would make a difference for. From there, okay, how do we address the ongoing nature of rising property values over time and the impact of mill rates and, you know, the overall property tax situation? Okay, let's do $1,600. So I think you can see the trajectory, roughly speaking, when it comes to that. And when it comes to the opposition, like, what are we doing? You know, just look around. I don't need to reflect on anything more than the lack of actions, lack of questions from the opposition. Somebody should draft a really exotic leave request that we pose to the committee right now. Perhaps we should ask for leave to deny all question period questions for the members opposite. Perhaps we should say, you know what, we got better things to do than this. We should, you know, dissolve the legislative session until the fall. Something like that. Of course, you know, we'll hit a bit of a snag because this leave request at committee would then have to go to the House, and I'm sure the members who are fleeing their responsibility to ask questions would probably hear the bells ringing at some point and maybe ask one of the clerks, hey, what is this leave request all about? Can you explain this in terms that I could understand? And then they'll say, well, not the clerks, but just, you know, whoever's talking and advising the PCs would say, well, we explained the Caretaker Convention to you in very clear terms, and you still violated it. How should we do this? Like, are you guys gonna like willfully disregard the advice that we're giving, as you did to the former clerk of the Executive Council, and you are now doing in a very cute fashion to the Conflict of Interest Commissioner? Or should we like create a diagram for you? Nope, wait, we did that with the Caretaker Convention. You forgot, ignored, disregarded. Maybe we can get like a series of dolls and kind of act out the scenario of how this leave request could be responded to. You're going to be on this side of the House, and when the Speaker looks at you, you stand up and you say no, you know. So there's all different ways that we could help our colleagues across the aisle.
The hour being 5 p.m., committee rise.